And then I said, like, you don't love me. And that's Ellery when he said, yeah, I guess I don't. And all the
Mm.
time I
Wow.
have said those things, I wanted him to say, I wanted him to grab me and kiss me and say, yes, I do. And he
Wow.
said he didn't. And I was like, gutted.
I need to hear this from Tom. Tom, you actually
Yeah.
said that. Well, I guess I don't. Well, were you frustrated? Were
Oh,
you
yeah. Just
was it a response that came about from anger? Was it like what was your emotion when you said that?
It was definitely a conversation that we'd circled around for a while. And so yes, there was a certain level of frustration that we had where we weren't able to get to the point and be able to help each other out. And so there was a baseline of frustration and a good amount in that conversation.
tears. Yeah.
And so it was a high emotional conversation, and it got to that point. But and it the goodness was that we were speaking truth to each other.
Yeah.
I have put everything into this relationship. What do I have to show for it?
This is not what I signed up for.
I'm afraid of what will happen to the kids if we get a divorce. I'm afraid of what will happen to me if I stay in this marriage.
I'm not even sure that I believe in love anymore.
I want to stay married, but I don't even know why, because it's not making me happy.
How can I feel so alone when I'm not even single?
So many people are struggling with this exact thing.
We have to normalize the struggle.
I mean, a perfect relationship, what is that? Does that even exist?
Having a metric to gauge where you are right now.
Staying in isolation, it's a death sentence.
It's almost like being buried alive.
Positive change just doesn't happen overnight. I mean, do you even want it to? Well, no, of course you want it to happen overnight.
This is how we decide to walk in the promise of life more abundantly.
Ultimately, you are the one who decides how good your relationship is.
Take the next step.
Borrow someone else's hope.
Borrow our hope.
Every relationship
always has room to grow.
Welcome to the Let's Grow Together podcast. This is the Grow in Love show with Coach Danny and Coach Ellery. And today we have some special guests. We are here to help those who have fallen in love continue to grow in love. We normalize the struggles in marriage and give you the tools so that your unique, one-of-a-kind relationship can do more than survive, but can actually thrive, because love should last a lifetime, and it can if we're doing the right things, if we're staying out of isolation. Let's grow together.
Thank you, Danny. Of course, it's so great to be here with you. And tonight we have with us Thomas and Katie Harper. They're coming to us live from San Antonio, Texas. And I met Thomas, was it in February? I think we were both at a personal development event. And as I want to do, I was asking people about their marriages, about their relationships. And Thomas shared with me such a great story that is so aligned with what we're doing here in the Grow in Love podcast that I was so excited to be able to invite him and his wife to come on and share their story with us. And so for the first time, I'm going to get her perspective. So we know we're getting the truth tonight. No, I'm just kidding. Of course, we're going to find the truth, and we're so glad that you're here and sharing with us. So why don't we just begin? And Katie, why don't you introduce yourself, kind of tell us where you grew up, and then Thomas, you can do the same and tell us how you met.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you for having us. So I grew up in a military family. My dad was in the Navy. So as you do, you move around a lot. He finally retired in Kentucky, of all places. And so I went to little middle school, high school there, and then went off to Idaho for college. And my parents are still married. We had a pretty good upbringing. They had my mom is from New York. She's the daughter of immigrants. My dad is from the deep South. So very open parents. And went to Idaho for school and met him my junior year.
Oh,
I met this kid and I thought he was a freshman, but he was not.
He was acting like a freshman.
So that's a bit of where I come from.
So where I grew up, similar. So my dad was military. He was a Army dentist. And so am the fifth child. So I'm the baby of the family. And so when he retired from the Army, I was similar to Katie in about middle school age. And so we'd been stationed in Colorado, then went to Germany, then came back to Colorado. And so he decided to retire out of the Army base there in Colorado. And then we moved to Idaho, where a lot of his family are from. They built their forever home out there. And then that's where I spent my growing up years. So out in rural, so like southeastern Idaho area, and enjoyed that experience. And then similar, I got into college out in that same state, so out in Idaho, in Rexburg, and that's where we met that junior year.
Yeah.
Tom, I gotta ask, what's out in Idaho? I'm a city boy from Washington D.C. All I know is Idaho potatoes. They really have a lot of potatoes.
It's a hidden gem. It's so beautiful.
Yes, so it's high desert in that particular area. Like up in the Panhandle is more the pretty part. If you've ever seen a river runs through it, that was filmed in kind of that Panhandle area of Idaho. So that's the pretty part. We're in the high desert, so not as pretty until you start getting up into the mountains. It has its own unique beauty. But yes, speaking of potatoes, I actually drove a truck for a potato farmer. So in high school, they have potato harvest. So the kids actually get out of high school for like a week and a half, 2 weeks. And they go, and most of them work for the local farmers. So I did that. I got some pocket money for going snowboarding in the wintertime. So I drove a potato truck. So it's a fun little tidbit about me.
Yeah.
Thank you for your service. I love potatoes.
Yeah.
Back to your story.
Yeah.
I'm sure the story of your relationship is much more interesting. So you guys meet, you guys are from different places, different backgrounds, and tell us about how you met and what that experience was like falling in love.
Man, it was interesting. I will say so that particular university, they kind of assign you different groups of men and women to kind of just hang out as a family and have activities and things like that. And he actually went on a date with like 4 of my roommates before he went on a date with me.
Wait.
And they were
4
casual.
of your roommates?
Yeah, because the other 2 were engaged or like they were with someone. So every single roommate. But it was like you went on like a date or 2. It was very casual. Like that was very common in like that university. It's like casual dating, go to an event with someone, you never did anything on your own. You just found a date and went. And so anyway, and then he finally asked me out. And like my roommate was really liked him. And so she would be like, hey, do you want to come play tennis with us? Thomas will bring a roommate. And she'd play with Thomas and I'd play with whatever roommate he brought. And hey, do you want to go to the movies? Hey, do you want to go bowling? Hey, do you want to go watch Thomas's soccer match? So I just like put 0 effort in. I just, I would just go with her. She's like so smitten by him. And
I was not smitten with her. So I was glad that Katie came along. I was like, yes, Katie come along. And so in the tennis, I was like, oh, let's look for opportunities to switch up who's playing who. And so I can play with Katie. So
I had no idea.
Yeah. So I was not interested in her, more interested in you.
So we started going on dates and he just kept asking me on dates. And then it slowly became a little something where I was a little confused. Thomas was very like subtle. I would just remember asking his roommate, like, are you sure he's interested? Because he doesn't even like hold my hand. Like we've been walking around the block for hours. My hand has been out and it's freezing. He won't hold my hand. So I was kind of confused. Like he was a very subtle guy, which should have been a hint. Like, I think that applies to kind of our marriage in general, is that his level of emotion is very subdued and very subtle. And at the time, I didn't know. I was like 19, 20 years old. I didn't know much about love or marriage. And so it just kind of like was this lava flow of dating, not like fireworks, you know.
Slow and steady. Yeah, it's a slow mover. And even slow to kiss. Because I didn't have my first kiss until college, actually. So slow mover. Yeah, that kind of is a theme that you'll see throughout.
Yeah. So yeah, we just dated, and then he was actually going on an internship and down in Utah, and I thought, oh well, we're not going to do long distance, but he's a really great guy. I'm so glad like I had this time with him, but I did not think that his subtlety would last long distance. I was like, there's no way. Like I don't feel the fire. Like I don't feel like he's really gonna. So we went on this walk, and I thought that was in like we're gonna go our separate ways, and he was like, "What are you? Do you think we're breaking up?"
It's like, no, this is serious.
Yeah, and he was like, "Wait a minute, what?" So.
And she brought up good things. She's like, with how little we talk over the phone, it's going to be mostly on the phone. And so, are you willing? Are you going to actually call me? It's like, yes, I will do it. I'll call you.
He did. He called me a lot. Like I have memories falling asleep on the phone, and him falling asleep on the phone. So I just remember being like, okay, he's really committed. So we went on a road trip to visit my family in Kentucky, and he proposed to me there. And then we were married about a year after we started dating, I think. So it's pretty quick.
And a fun little side note, that morning that I asked Katie's parents for her hand in marriage, there was an earthquake in that town. And so that was my first real earthquake that I realized was an earthquake. I was like, why is the bed like moving in the morning? Wow. So maybe it was a sign that it was meant to be, but it was kind of cool little fun story that was the morning we had that earthquake.
Yeah. And his sister actually randomly lives in my hometown in Kentucky. So I found out his sister lived in Lexington, Kentucky when we were still just friends. He's like, I have a sister who lives there. And so a lot of the people I grew up with and they know. And so it's really weird that my best friend growing up is really good friends with his sister's family. So it was kind of this fun thing, like, you know, that this tie into my life felt like a little more like home. It was kind of fun. So yeah, so that's the story. It's a good one.
That's great. So you were just set up for just perfect success. Yeah. Obviously.
Right.
What could go wrong? He made the phone calls. He's obviously committed from here on out.
Right.
No problems.
We took the classes. I took a preparation for marriage class in college, and I told him to take it this semester we were dating. I was like, you have to take this class, you know, it's like a religious class that is like, you know, preparation for marriage. You like learn your love language. You kind of learn some of these things, and it kind of opens your mind a little bit. But yeah, it was kind of funny. So we took the classes. We should have known all the things. Like
we were so ready.
We're so ready.
Nothing could go wrong. Well, that's part of the optimism of getting married, right?
Yeah.
Because you're just like, obviously, I found the one.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine my life without this person. I remember very much being like, you know, it doesn't matter what happens going forward, because I know my life's going to be better with him than without him. Right. Yeah. That's what I had, that kind of a feeling.
I'm sorry. Happily ever after doesn't exist? Like
it does before you're married.
What is?
But then after, then you're realizing.
Does it? There's someone, it's like Brene Brown or somebody, some author I've read was like, and we worked happily ever after. Like and we like, you know, like redid that whole phrase that, you know, we worked at it forever after. Yeah. So
I heard somebody put it like this. They said that you want to know if you want to know why no one asked what happens, it said, what was it? It said the reason why they say they lived happily ever after and they leave it there is because no one wants to stay and find out what happens next. Because they know it's going to go to, it's not going to hold up.
Yeah.
Something's going to hit the fan.
That's true. That's true.
Well, yeah, you never want to, you know, follow up the romantic comedy with like some kind of tragedy or some kind of horror story. Sometimes that's what it can feel like. in marriage. You know, things start out so great, and then there's a shift. Things change, right? Or I don't know if things change or things kind of reveal themselves. Things that we thought weren't going to be a big deal, or things that we thought weren't going to be a problem, suddenly they are. So why don't we go ahead and let's go ahead and jump forward to kind of the crossroads in your relationship. There became a point, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Katie, you pretty much, would you call it an ultimatum?
Kind of like that moment that happened was a moment where we had to say, okay, here's the options. Like, we either don't do this anymore or we do. Like, it was a moment where I'm like, oh, So it was definitely a crossroads. And I wasn't like, hey, do this or leave. It wasn't that kind of ultimatum, but we definitely felt like we have to do something. Like, this is a moment of decision.
Katie, can I interject for a second? Like, I wanted to know what led to the crossroad. What built you up to that point? Like, how did you get from, oh, we're gonna live happily ever after, this is our wedding day, to, okay, we're at a crossroad, buddy. And this isn't working. Like, what led to that process, that experience? What were the emotional interactions that what were the emotional situations that you were managing as a new wife, that he was managing as a husband, and how did that come together to collide and create that moment where you're at the crossroad?
That's the question. That's the big question. We were married for 8 years when we hit that crossroads. And as I look back, the first moment where I realized there was something and I didn't know what it was, then I didn't have the language to identify it. And that was a big hurdle. And why it took 8 years was because we didn't have the language. We didn't know what we didn't know. And that was really hard to talk through anything when you have no idea what the words are. So I remember it was like a year and a half after we got married.
I'm sorry, Katie, I just got to interrupt. I have a bad problem with this. You as a woman saying you didn't have the words is amazing to me.
Right? Yeah.
Like, is this recorded? Are we recording this?
I did not have the words yet. And part of it is because I am talking to a very complex human being. And when you fall in love with someone, I don't think you realize the complexity, because you think you know so much. You think you know them, and you just realize like how much you don't know. And all of a sudden I have to translate what I think I know and the words I know into something he can understand, which I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to speak Thomas, and he doesn't know how to speak Katie. And so, the first time I realized was about a year and a half after we were married. We were living in China, and we were all on our own, which is really great, like to kind of figure out some things, to have some time to ourselves. We loved our time there. But I remember sitting on the bed and I'd had some highs and lows, and I wasn't sure, like, being on birth control. I'd been on birth control my whole life, but as a woman, I don't know, Ellery, like you can attest, like there's a lot emotionally that goes on that sometimes the world will be like, oh, it's just your emotions, or it's just your cycle, or it's just birth control. And it's really hard as a woman to know like what's real and what is like just part of the ebb and flow. I mean, it's all real because it all feels real, but like, what do I need to make a big deal of, and what can I wait a couple days on? So I just remember sitting there being confused. Like, is this my birth control, or does my husband not love me? Like, I was like, where, I'm starting just to feel like he's really lukewarm. Like he enjoys me and we're like playing house and we're doing the things, but like, I'm not his buddy. Like, and it's hard because we would have interactions with other people, and the guy would be like always putting his arm around her and like snuggling her and kissing her on the forehead and like these tiny little things, these like micro things and saying the things. And I just thought, I could be his sister for like, except for a few things, like intimacy wise, like I don't feel like where did it go? I wasn't feeling that. And I thought, is this a problem, or is this just like the ebb and flow? So we would have little things and I was like, are you sure you like me? Like you say those things to get a response, and he'd be like, oh yeah, and he'd say the things. And So it was that dance for a long time. And then we had.
Can I
Yeah, I was
ask
just going to interrupt here and see what Thomas's reaction was to this kind of thing. Did you start to notice a change in her? That she started looking for more validation, was asking for more,
There was, so for me, thinking back on it, I was in a place where I was very complacent and be like, yeah, everything's good. Where we're at, it's good. I'm enjoying this, and it's
That's
all
a wonderful
okay.
thing about Thomas. He's super content guy.
And so that was good, but there'd be instances where I was not emotionally evolved, and I would easily shut down and or break down in different instances. And so, I mean, looking back on that now, you could see that and how much we progressed to this point. But there'd be times where I would feel that fear of like, oh, I don't know. And there would be instances where she'd have to kind of pick up my pieces and put me back together before I would be capable to give a response. And so there's some of that's happening. But during this time, it was like, okay, yeah, all is good.
We didn't know this. We couldn't have articulated what that was. Now we can look back, and now we can say, oh, he was in an emotional flatline, and I was trying to like, okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Like, I can't get what I need emotionally from him because he's shut down. So I need to like, it's okay, you're fine, in order to get him to a place where he can give me what I need. But we had no idea that that's what was happening. No idea.
So you were basically having to emotionally regulate for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So you kind of get flooded. I mean, if we're kind of using like our technical terms here, where it just kind of became too much. You didn't know what to do with all of that. And so then you would help to get him to a place where, because he maybe wasn't really great at self-soothing. Right. And so just needed some help to feel good again after maybe some criticism or some kind of maybe unwanted or surprise feedback from your wife. But at the same time, you have those emotional needs. And when he shuts down, you don't feel connected.
Yeah. It was.
So then you have to work twice as hard.
Yeah. Conflicted.
Right, to be able to get back to that point again.
Yeah. Our family histories play really into this. And we didn't realize that. Thomas came from a family where there was like zero contention. Like, have you ever seen your parents argue?
No, we were big time sweep it under the ruggers. So I'm a recovering conflict avoider.
Yeah. My family's the opposite. Have it out, boom. And there were times where I would just be like, why won't you fight with me? Like, in a good way, like, come at me. Like, I need you to meet me halfway. And he just like couldn't,
Because that's what people who are in a family, in a loving relationship do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like he just couldn't. There was no debate. There was no, like, he just would get super uncomfortable. So we were trying to figure that out too. Like, okay, how can I tone it down and how can he turn it up so that we can both meet in a place where we can effectively communicate?
Yeah, and that passing each other, I was thinking like, okay, everything's good. Like, I'm doing the things. But I get the message like, oh, you're not doing the things, or you're not doing this thing.
And that's hard.
And I'm like, oh man, I thought I was doing the things.
I'm trying so hard.
And I'm trying hard. So let me double down on my effort. Let me do more of the things. Yeah. Or let me try to listen. And this is what I understand you saying you need. So let me try that. And a lot of times I would interpret that in my own way. Like, oh, let me double down on the things that I'm, I guess, comfortable doing, and so those mix-ups of the love languages would happen, and I'd put in extra effort. I'd be like, okay, and then we'd circle around it again and hit it, and I'd be like, oh, and she'd be like, no, it's still not the thing. And I'd be like, what? But I've been putting in extra effort. She's like, no, it's not that. And be like, man, and that would be very frustrating and put me to a point where, yes, I'd spiral in that shutdown and be like, I've been trying so hard, and it would just like wear on me, and I'd break down and be like, man, this is, why isn't my effort yielding the result?
Yeah. A big place that he would go to protect himself was in, and we just call it, like, our language for it now is like, he would go into a bunker where, like, it's an emotionally flatlined place. So if I don't want to feel pain anymore, I'm going to shut myself off from everything, because you can't just turn off the bad. If you have emotion, you turn it all off or nothing. Like, you can't just turn off the bad. If you turn off the bad, you turn off the good. And so he would turn it all off and head down into the bunker. And it was like, for me, it was like the lights are on, but no one's home. Like, there's
Wow.
no feeling behind. And I'm like, I thought I was crazy. And it wasn't till I was reading Brene Brown, like, it was like Daring Greatly or Braving the Wilderness or something, where she talked about feeling crazy in a relationship. Like, you're feeling crazy because you're saying, like, you don't love, and they're like, I do, but you don't. And the lights are on and no one's home. I'm talking and you're saying the things, but there's no heart behind it. And it wasn't malice. It was just, he was shut down. Like, he was in a safe place for him. So, yeah.
Can we jump over to Tom? I'm curious to get his response to what Katie just verbalized about him. Like, what was that experience like for you, Tom? Like man to man, what was going on where she's like, the lights are on, but there's no one home. You were you checked out? Did you care? And what do you now see that she might not have experienced, or do you see? Just talk to me about your experience, like, based on what she just said as a man. Like, talk to us.
So, I mean, it was that effort that I thought that I was doing it. I was like, and I was willing. I was like, yes, I'm willing to put in the effort. I put in the effort, and then the response would come back like, nope, you haven't hit the mark. So I try again and try. So it was that immensely frustrating place of I thought I was doing it, and now it's just getting more frustrating. And for me, when I get frustrated, I get overwhelmed, and it puts me in a place of just like, ah, man, and just kind of shuts me down there. But the other thing that we've noticed now looking back is that bigger changes, life changes for me, put me in a downward dip for a little while. So depending on the scope of the change, the amount of change that's happening, I'll go in a dip of like anxiety and some depression mixed in there. And so now looking back, we see that those are correlated to these things like, oh, yeah, we moved to China. That was a big change. Or we changed a job, or we had a kid. Like, those things were big life events, and they put me down in that bunker now that we have the language for it. But it was very much, I like the analogy of a color TV. Like, life was vibrant. It was like 5K color TV, awesome. And then it would slowly go to like monochrome, and then less vibrant. It would just be dull, and until I was in this bunker. And it's these relationships that get pared down. So like, okay, yeah, I'm interacting with like friends, and then that one peels off. And then now I'm interacting with my family, like my brothers and sisters, my parents, and that one peels off. And then it's my family, so my kids and my wife, and then that one peels off, and then it's just me. So when we get to this place that's just black and white and just dull and nothing, it's just and it's this bunker and this place of no emotion, with that desire to get back, but not sure. It's just kind of waiting it out. So I'm like, yes, I do get out of it, but it takes a while. So I just kind of hang out there and try to go through the steps, go through the paces, just to wait it out and hope that the color comes back into life and the vibrancy again, that I feel the things and enjoy life there. Because in the bunker, it's not fun. It's just survival, and it's not enjoyable.
And I didn't know what he was doing then. I didn't know that's what it was. I was like, I just had no idea. Yeah.
Because where do you go to find this stuff out? Like, who teaches? They don't teach it in school.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of something that we want to just take a brief break and share with our listeners to help them avoid what scenario we're hearing now. Because oftentimes when you have a solution, it becomes unnecessary pain. So here's a something for you to consider from one of our sponsors.
Have you thought about how important your marriage is lately? We have been. Coach Danny and I have been thinking about how important every marriage is. And that's why we started the M Squad, couples fighting together for a love that lasts forever. Because we know that couples, gosh, it is harder than you think. After the I do, now what do I do now? So we have the M Squad, an opportunity for you to get out of isolation, to be able to get with other couples, to be able to hear other people. What are they struggling with? Is what you're going through normal? Is this really how marriage is supposed to be? Are there other ways that we can get through these difficult times? The answer is yes. I want you to check it out, themsquad.com. THEMsquad.com. To give you the strength that you need, the accountability that you need to make real differences in your marriage.
And now that we're coming back, I've got to just comment on something that Tom said that was really I can identify with as a man. And Ellery, when we do our events, I think that men also identify with this. I call it the bubblegum analogy, where the guy comes with his quarter and we put the quarter in the bubblegum machine, but nothing comes out. And it's like, wait. We're logical beings. And so we're like, we see a sign that says bubblegum, 25 cents. And so we're like, oh, I'm about to get it now. I see. All I need to do is put the quarter in. We put the quarter in, and then and that can lead to us shutting down. And it leads to us being confused because the sign said that if you put a quarter in, that you're going to get the bubble gum. But that's not the way it is, because women are from another planet. Tom, I feel you, man. and I want to let Ellery dive deep, because I know that she's very emotionally intelligent. Where do you want to explore from there, Ellery? I just had to get that point out.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think this is something that so many couples deal with. And I appreciate, Katie, how you were just talking about, you're saying, am I crazy? Right. Yeah. And that's kind of what happens when we're in isolation, right? When we aren't talking to other people. And so often when we are mixing with other couples, everybody's just happy. Everybody's got their smiles on, everybody's talking about how great things are, and we don't really often have that opportunity to be able to talk about these things. And sometimes when we do reach out to other people, like our sisters, our good friends, they just take our side right away, right? And tell us he's the worst, or just, you know how it can get because they care about us so much, right? But I'm really interested to see kind of where this crossroads took you, because it's not like you were both just kind of going along and not talking about it. It's not like there was an elephant in the room. Like, you had both making serious steps to try and improve the relationship. But as you said, you didn't really have the vocabulary that you needed to be able to succinctly say, and now you can say the bunker and you both know exactly what you're talking about, right? Which is so powerful and so helpful to be able to have that common vocabulary, to be able to use that. So really, what brought us to that crisis point? You're 8 years in, you've got kids. Thomas is there thinking, okay, we've got the job, we've got the house, we've got the kids, I've put in all my quarters, right? Like to Danny's metaphor there. And so then, so go ahead and set that story up for us, that moment.
So there's this theme that's happening as it's this back and forth interaction where we're missing each other as far as explaining what we need and being able to give what we need. And so it becomes more and more frustrating for us both, that Katie's expressing like, hey, yeah, this is what I need. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. And more of that, where we're like, we are not getting there, and so from my perspective, just more of that frustration. And I'd like double down and I like journal, and I'm like, okay, let me try these things and let me do this. And so I try different methods, but it wasn't getting there. So it's just this growing frustration on both of our ends. And then it came to the event.
That day. And I, as a mom, was kind of drowning a little bit in motherhood, as you do, a little, and I wanted my buddy. Like, I wanted him to, I wanted that closeness. I really like felt alone, and I really wanted to be like super duper in love. Like, when we shut the door, we're like, ooh, yay, it's my buddy, we're best friends. And that was where my sadness came from. And our every few months things would bubble. And every few months we would have that conversation of essentially like, I don't feel like you love me. Like, I don't, I can't remember the words, but that time we had finally gained enough knowledge from reading some books, enough language where I was able to articulate that I don't feel like my love language was words of affirmation. And he was not like,
He wasn't getting it. I wasn't getting it.
yeah. And that's not, I would say like I was not good at that. Like, that wasn't a thing he did. He didn't like say those things. And I remember literally saying like, do you ever think about me during the day? And he'd be like, yeah. I'm like, do you ever think of good thoughts? And he'd be like, yeah. I was like, say those out loud. Like, that's what I want to hear, the thoughts that are in your head. And because I'm not going to know. And then the story I'm telling myself in my head, that phrase in and of itself from Brene Brown was like, because then I had a way to articulate from my perspective, this is what I feel. And so the story I was telling myself in my head is that he thinks I'm okay and our life is okay, but he doesn't really love me. He doesn't want to spend time with me, doesn't want to date me, doesn't all these things. And then I said, like, you don't love me. And that's Ellery when he said, yeah, I guess I don't. And all the time I have said those things, I wanted him to grab me and kiss me and say, yes, I do. And he said he didn't. And I was like, gutted.
I need to hear this from Tom. Tom, you actually said that. Well, I guess I don't. Well, were you frustrated? Were you was it a response that came about from anger? Was it like, what was your emotion when you said that?
It was definitely a conversation that we'd circled around for a while. And so, yes, there was a certain level of frustration that we had where we weren't able to get to the point and be able to help each other out. And so there was a baseline of frustration and a good amount in that conversation.
Tears.
And so it was a high emotional conversation, and it got to that point. But the goodness was that we were speaking truth to each other.
Yeah.
That it was what needed to be said. Even though saying it and explaining the story, it's like, whoa, yeah. But now retracing those steps, yes, that's what was needed.
Yeah.
And we needed to get to that point, and I needed to say that even though I didn't want to, right? You don't want that. You don't want to arrive at that point, but we had. And so that conversation was very helpful. And yes, I did say those things. And that was like, boom. Okay, from that conversation, we went our separate ways in the house.
Yeah.
And we each needed some time to think. And the scenario started going of like, yeah, okay, what is that? And mostly scenarios that were negative. Okay, what is this? What does this mean? Right? Am I going to be a single? What is this? Like, what's the family? So your head goes into a lot of the negative stories for a while. And then there was also this other thought that popped in my head was, okay, do you want this relationship? Right? You have a choice, Thomas. So is this something that you still want in your life? And my answer was yes. Like it was a little yes. Like it wasn't like, yes, passionate. Yes, here we go. It was like, it was a Thomas. Okay. Yeah, so he wanted, but it was
the expectation that you see in the movies. Like, do you think he's going to be like, yes, I still, yeah.
So it was this little yes, but it was, instead of me spinning around in circles, just ruminating on this, it was now a direction saying, okay, yes, I've made that decision and I'm moving in this direction. I don't know what that means. There's so much gray area here. I don't know next steps really, but I know that it's a yes. And I know that I want to put effort into that and work towards the thing, whatever it is. And so that decision was at least facing a direction, and not necessarily moving, but facing in a direction. And that was helpful to start. And it was a rough go, and a lot of pain, suffering throughout that. But that was a meaningful moment for me.
Yeah. So I have a quick question there, Thomas, as far as why do you think kind of having the courage to speak that truth was the impetus to get you like more authentically going in that direction? Does that make sense? Because you had previously had been doing the things, you had put more effort in. I'm going to put more effort in. So how was this shift so significant? And then what changed after that moment? And how did your approach change? And then Katie, did your approach change as well?
So that the shift was realizing, being able to see that I'd said those words and to know that they were true. To realize that, like I said that and I meant that. But then I also meant this decision, and having gotten enough learning at that point that I knew that it was possible. Like we could figure out the things, we could build the skills towards this direction, and start to develop the language. Like I didn't know necessarily how, but I knew, I guess, that it was possible. And it was this knowing also that what we had done up to that point was no longer gonna serve. Like, okay, Thomas, you have to really do different things. Like you gotta try some other stuff and learn some new things, because what you have been doing hasn't led to a result. So it's a frustration boiling up until this breaking point. And now I was open to new things and willing to try different stuff, because what I had done for those last 8 years got us to a point and was good enough. And it was also that realization, like, I do want a life that has more. That it's like, oh, Katie's saying that we can get over to here. Okay, let's try that out. Like, yes, that sounds great, and I'm curious to see if that's possible. I don't know if it is, because my emotional range is pretty squished. So I'm like, I'm up for it. Let's explore that and let's try it.
Yeah, I like after that, I felt so vulnerable, like so kind of gutted. I felt like I felt like I was naked in a room of 1,000 people. Like all of a sudden, I felt like, because you basically admit that like you're in love with this person and you want love up to here, and they've just told you that. And so you're like, okay. And I remember being in my son's room. We were getting ready to take our kids to SeaWorld that night. Like, and the kids are ready to go. And I like had to just go cry it out. And I just was like, my biggest fear in marriage was to be in a loveless marriage. That was like my biggest fear. And I was like, well, here I am. Here I am. And what do I, what do I want to do? And so I thought like, yes, I want to try. I still want to be in love, and I still want that like I just want to be in love, and I want to have a fun relationship and have a buddy and a friend and a boyfriend and all the things, and a relationship and a partner. And I wanted all those things still. Right. And I was just like, okay, I need to find out where Thomas is. Like, is he still willing to do this? Which I didn't know, so we kind of took the night off, and I think a couple of days we were just emotionally like benign, spent, and we were like, just do no harm for those few days, but slowly started implementing some pretty critical skills, right? And one of them was the rumble. Like, our conflicts need to be efficient. We need to get into it, solve the problem in a respectful way, and then we can move on. Because previously you dance around it or you avoid it. And we're like, if there's a moment where I'm like, hey, this is an opportunity, like, how do you feel right now? Like, what are you thinking right now? Or, hey, tonight we need to talk about this specific thing, so get ready. Like, we got better at those things. Like, I remember distinctly, like, hey, we need to rumble. Like we'd use that word, like we need to hash something out. And then reiterating what our needs were. And it's not romantic to say, hey, can you write me a letter? If you think about me when you're at work, can you send me a text? Hey, can we share our interests with each other? Again, can we make an effort to do things that we like? Can you plan this date for me? Hey, here's a list of really fun things on Amazon that I like. Can you pick one out for my birthday? Like, or like he would have, I remember looking at your phone once and a reminder popped up and it was like, text Katie something nice or something like that. Like we had to go back to like the basics and not fake it till you make it, but like we had to just stop pretending we would automatically know anything. Like stop pretending we knew anything and just ask and just try. If you don't know, ask. If you don't know what you're doing, try it. If you don't know how to give a compliment, just try. We had to just really come down to the simple forms of learning those things.
Well, I think this is so great, guys. Your story is so inspiring to me, just because really, Katie, you had this opportunity to kind of try and explain to Thomas that there is this technicolor life. There is this technicolor marriage out there. And it's interesting that you had to kind of get to this bottom, really vulnerable place where he could be like, no, I'm in black and white. But still, Thomas, that you had enough faith that you were willing to believe that there was more. Like you had that willingness to try and see if it's actually out there, even though you might not have had any personal experience or even the vision on your own to be able to see what she was talking about. I mean, and sometimes kind of the metaphor that came to you was like there was a broken bone, and just for years you were throwing band-aids on it. Right? This should do it. This should do it. It's not that big of a problem, right? And yet, and what this beautiful story is that also, Katie, you had to accept those beginning steps.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
instead of being like, I'm looking for this man on a white horse, right, who reads my mind and knows everything and could write, and he knows me better than I know myself.
Yeah.
Right. What is that?
Say that again, Ellery. Say that part again. Say that part again.
He knows me better than I know myself.
There's like no such thing as that. It doesn't exist, and they can't read your mind. And even when I like verbatim tell him, sometimes we still don't get it right. So like, you know,
the other day.
But like I had to just stop romanticizing that, because it's just not, it's just a false narrative. And real love, like honestly, I think like the best thing about Thomas is that he will always try. Always. Like he will stand there and he's like, he will always try and he will always be there and just keep trying. And like, he just won't give up, you know? And in marriage, when people ask me like, what do you need to look for in a person? And I'm like, oh, a person who loves marriage, you know, they can't just love you, you know, they love the partnership, and a person who won't give up, like a person who's willing to try anything. He will read the books. I was ordering books and quizzes.
Wait, he's a man who's reading the books?
Yes.
Come on, Thomas. I gotta give you a virtual fist bump there. Let's go, bro.
The self-help book. Like
you're the one that the shepherd left, you know, the 99, the other guys, I don't know what. That's awesome that he was reading the books.
Like I just was so grateful when it was all the Brene Brown books we had read, which really helped with our emotional language and intelligence, his needs, her needs. Like the Gottman Institute had a whole bunch of stuff on marriage, and we would do the quizzes to get to know each other, the quizzes about our expectations. What is your definition of love? What is your hierarchy of needs? Can you rate those? And we would look at these papers and be like, what? And we were married like 8 to 10 years, you know? And ironically, in this spring, we retook the love languages. Our love languages had completely changed. And just, they flipped. His was words of affirmation and mine was acts of service. And that's what they were flipped when we first got married. So it is like bizarre. Like, stop thinking you know your spouse so well. It's probably always a safer bet to just assume there's more to them to know, but he would do the quizzes in our bed. I got a couples journal, and we would do that every Sunday. And he was so willing to, like, and you fall in love doing those silly, funny things.
And I think as well, you find the things that you enjoy doing together. So Katie knows that I geek out on like personal development stuff. And so it's like, oh, it was something that we had shared interest in doing, a way to work on a relationship that we both were invested in and interested in doing. So finding that was super helpful. And so something that we were both engaged and interested in. And then there was, the other point was the amount of effort. Like when you're newly married and when you're getting into a marriage relationship, you're like, okay, everything's going to be awesome. You didn't realize the level of effort that it takes to maintain. So there's one, just maintain. And that's where I was at for that first 8 years. Like, okay, maintenance mode is good. This is where we need to be. I need to maintain.
Yeah.
But then there's the progression and the extra amount of effort to progress a relationship. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
And so now being able to look back down the mountain and say, okay, that was effortful, and knowing how much more. So and then that also gives you perspective to look forward to say, oh, if we want to keep progressing our relationship, that's going to be a hell of a amount of work. But now that we've seen where we're at and we're like, okay, yeah, let's do it, because we're invested. We know the goodness that comes from putting in that effort. But it's amazing just to realize it is effortful. Yeah. Like maintaining a relationship and growing a relationship, it is effortful, and it is easy to wax into maintenance mode, and then even letting that drop into just letting it degrade.
Yeah. I remember asking Thomas once, just like, what was the thing you expected that surprises you the most about marriage? And he said, how much work it takes. I was like, okay.
So to go back to my analogy briefly, I love how, Katie, you pointed out that Tom, the best part about him is he keeps trying. And on the replay, I want you to watch his facial expressions while you said that. It was a very moving experience, because you could tell that it was like, wow, she like really sees it. She really appreciates it, because it's tantamount to going back to the analogy of the bubblegum machine. You putting a quarter in and you're watching your quarters disappear, and you go and you put another quarter in and there's still no bubblegum. And you're talking about the effort. You put another quarter in and no bubblegum, and you're looking, I got 3 quarters left. Yeah. And when you keep going like Thomas, and I just want to salute you, brother, because it's very uncommon to have that trait nowadays, where you're down to your last quarter and you put it in and you keep going and you keep giving, and then you go and look under the couch for some more quarters, because you're determined to keep trying, to keep giving, so that you can grow in love, because you know that you're going to figure it out, even if it takes a little more time than you actually wanted it to. So I'm just amazed at the connection you guys share, and to know that all of this came about through struggle, through conflict. Something good came out of this unpleasant, undesirable, everything hitting the fan moment. Yeah. And I want to just encourage those who might be listening, if your fan is a little messy right now, like Tom and Katie's experience can be yours. If you keep going, and if you get equipped with the right tools, there's books, there's resources. We talked about the I don't think we talked about it this episode, the marriage report card, marriagereportcard.com, helping you get on the same page, see where each other is, and to strategically begin mapping a way to your ultimate relationship goals for your unique one-of-a-kind relationship, because every relationship always has room to grow. And I'm just so inspired by your story, by your journey. And I know there's other bits and pieces that we might not have experienced. I just want to ask briefly, at your lowest point, what was the emotion, if you could label like the darkest, like if you can put it in a sentence or a word, what was the emotion that was most troubling? And then follow-up question is, did you ever get out of isolation, or did you just stay and figure it out on your own?
I think I was afraid. I think fear was mine. Yeah. Like if I think about it, I think it was fear. And I don't know that we reached out. Like I can't remember. I know we have reached out like over the past few years that we've slowly been, working on things to different very close friends, because it's hard to trust someone with something that intimate. You're like, I don't know, one, like, can I trust them with my spouse, right? Like I don't want to talk to someone and have them completely shred my spouse. I don't need the girlfriend who's like, it was his fault. That's not what I wanted. I wanted him to feel safe and me to feel safe. And it's just hard. You're like, I don't know who to trust with those things. Ellery, you said that. You're like, your girlfriends or your mom, they'll automatically take your side. And you're like, so that was hard because I had never in my life had to like figure out who in my life could be that. So I right away, no, I did not like seek out any one particular. And I was also kind of embarrassed, like if I'm being honest. But eventually, like as we kind of got a grip on things and could explain things, we reached out to like a couple of your siblings who we were close to and my sister, and just chatted about some of those things. And then I serve at church. At the time I was serving as the head of the women's organization, and a lot of people come to you with their struggles in marriage. And that was like, I was like, I can stand completely from a place of empathy and help these women and be with these women. And so that was a really cool place to like, oh my gosh, like God has given us this trial to make me strong. And also now I can share it with other women who, are in that same place.
So I would say similar, that it was that feeling of fear that was at the base of that. And I guess that feeling of being gutted, right? Where you've hit bottom and it's just like, oh, that hole that sits inside you, that pit that's in your stomach, or a lot of the emotions that I was feeling throughout that, or that low point. And I'd say similar to Katie, it didn't feel like there was a need. I didn't have a desire to be outward and like look for people per se to get me, to help me process and to get me through. I don't feel like I needed that, but I was glad that we had started picking up tools and using them, right? Acquiring knowledge and information to help get us through. And like Katie was saying, there's other instances, other things that we've been through that, yes, we did need an outlet because it was a boiling over, and we needed to direct that not at each other, but help and direct that outwards and have somebody to counsel with. Another key component that I had learned for me, and as I mentioned towards the beginning of a recovering conflict avoider, that I had to remap my emotions around conflict. And I'm still doing that. But I've gotten to a point where I see the end result that's been good enough. So there's these rumbles that we've been talking about, knowing that the outcome is good. And I have to tell myself that, okay, I'm about to go into this rumble. I don't want to. My body's saying no, my emotions saying no, but I know the outcome's good, and I've experienced it enough that I got to tell that to myself in my brain. Okay, the outcome of this is good. So I'm going to push myself into there. Well, I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to get rough, but the outcome is good, and it always has been good. So I trust in that, and then I step over the cliff.
Take the leap of faith.
Take the leap of faith, go into rumble, because I know it's good on the other side. But that is a lot.
That's so great. So often when we have anxiety or fear, really the only antidote to that is exposure.
Yeah.
Right? Is being able to go through it again and again. And what's interesting, it doesn't necessarily make it go away. Right? No. It's not like now you hear rumble and your new association is woohoo, it's going to be great on the other side. You have to constantly kind of, it's like that old programming doesn't go away necessarily, right? But you have those new skills again through the exposure that again and again and again, and now you're able to do it. And even though even though you still have kind of the same physical response
Yeah.
to the idea of it. And I just think it's so great. Okay, I'm sorry about the metaphors because we keep talking about this gumball machine. And I'm
I
just
love
feeling like, but here's the thing is it's not 25 cents and it's not a gumball, right? It's $1,000 and it's an iPad. You know what I mean? Like that's more what it's like, right? Because if we get into a relationship and we have low expectations, right? We're not going to be able to get the motivation that we need to put the effort in if all we're expecting is a gumball.
Yeah.
But once we start to see that there is a much greater level of life, and that life is only available to us through the marriage relationship.
Yeah.
It's only through that growth and through that connection and actually not being alone. And of course, nobody's alone during the good times, right?
Yeah.
So when you're like dating and everything's fun and flirty and hooray, yeah, of course you feel good, but you could still potentially be alone. And that's what you find out. And you find out that that is a process. And then you can have someone that is so molded to you, like a pair of Birkenstocks. I grew up in California. You have to excuse the analogy.
I love that.
But I mean, they're expensive, but they're unique and they last a long time. And that's what we're looking for here. So I have to salute you both with your dedication. I love that you're talking about being in love with marriage and not just being in love with you, right? Being committed to this institution. And what a beautiful thing it is, the legacy that you're leaving for your children and their children as they continue on, as we all become kind of more evolved, right? And we're able to share this, we're able to model this with our families and be able to give people hope, right? So thank you so much for coming on and sharing this story and just your vulnerability. I appreciate it so much. And I know it's going to be a blessing to a lot of people as they come in here and they know we're not alone. We're not crazy.
Yeah.
There is more. There is more. And it's worth the effort, but we're not going to get there. We're not going to get there without the effort.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much. Yeah.
Yes, thank you guys.
Tom and Katie, you both have shared with us, and that I would ask if you think this statement is true. From the moment where you reach that fork in the road, would you say that at that point that the best was yet to come?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So what would you say about where you are right now?
Oh, I love it. Like, Ellery, something you just said, like the problems don't go away. The heaviness and analogies. Last night we were talking about this and I was like, it's like wearing a heavy backpack. When you first get married, you're this scrawny person carrying this heavy backpack and people keep throwing stones in it. But then when you get help and you go through the things and you grow and you learn, you get so strong and enormous that backpack feels lighter. Yeah. You still have problems and you still have things, but they come at us and we just, we keep going and it's just great. Like, I love where we are. It's fun. It's funny. Even working through our problems is funny now. Like we should,
yes.
It just, yeah. So I love where we are because it's still a place of progression, but we've molded like a Birkenstock, Ellery.
So it sounds to me like the best is still yet to come.
Hopefully, Danny.
Yes, we're gonna keep putting in that effort. We're gonna make it happen.
I love it. Our ultimate goals, again, we want to give people tools. We want to give hope. We want to normalize the struggle. One of my favorite things about both of you is you consume the resources of one of my favorite authors, Brene Brown. And we know that shame resilience, vulnerability can't happen in isolation. We have to, in order to get to wholehearted living, come with the right kinds of like-minded individuals, people who've earned the right to know our stories, to hear our struggles, to guide us through our painful experiences. And so we want everyone out there to know you don't have to struggle alone. Feel free to reach out to us, and we would love to explore opportunities because we can grow together.
thank you for joining us for this episode of the Grow in Love show. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single podcast. And remember, every relationship always has room to grow.